What is the time of that event if we're referring to Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
Sure. So the time of that event with the clock variance adjusted is 12:32:04 to between 12:32:04 and 12:32:12.
You were unable to successfully reinstall and test the infotainment and telematic systems, correct?
Correct.
Lexus locks cards in its system, correct?
It does, yes.
The Commonwealth's digital forensic analyst returns to the stand for more cross this morning. We're focusing on his testimony about a three-point turn and a backup event involving Karen Reed's SUV. And in Diddy's sex trafficking trial, the judge is warning prosecutors of gossip testimony instead of hard evidence. Is this a fair warning, though, from the court? And are federal prosecutors proving the sex trafficking charges? We're spotlighting the charges versus the testimony. And the judge overseeing Brian Kohberger's case is in search of a leaker, claiming that somebody has violated a gag order by giving information to news organizations. So will this tip the scales ahead of Brian Kohberger's trial? It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Tuesday morning to you and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm your host, Julie Grant. Are you ready for some coffee and some court? We got a great show planned, so let's get started. Grab that cup of coffee or tea or hot water with lemon, whatever you like in the morning. It's time for my opening statement. Will justice come undone? Will Zachary Adams' conviction for Holly Bobo's murder be vacated? And will a new trial be granted? Well, that's the legal question before the court this morning, and it seems to hinge on incriminating statements of a co-defendant and witness that have reportedly been recanted. Now, while the judge has a big decision to make today regarding the statements of Jason Aubrey, I'm thinking about Holly Bobo's family, and I know you are too. Imagine how they must feel having already had to bury their beautiful, beloved Holly after she was murdered, but then now potentially having the justice after her death come undone. Holly was a 20-year-old nursing student at the University of Tennessee when she went missing in April of 2021. She was smart, she was beautiful, and she was loved. And I'm sure there is not a day that goes by that her family isn't brokenhearted and missing Holly. And now they're unfortunately burdened with the stress of what the outcome of this push from her killer will be. Now, while we don't know what the judge will do, my friends, we can certainly send our good thoughts, our prayers, and our healing wishes to Holly's family. She may be gone, but she's not forgotten. And the true crime community has always and will always want justice for Holly Bobo. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it. Right now, it's time for your daily docket.
And he said, I need you to help me bury this body.
What was your plan of disposing of Holly's body?
It was to gut her, and I grabbed the upper torso of Miss Bobo. Zach come around, let the tailgate down. I brought the upper torso to the end of the tailgate.
Now, that was part of the testimony that landed Zachary Adams behind bars. This morning in Tennessee, he's going to be back in court at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Again, he's looking for a new trial after his conviction in the death of Holly Bobo. So we have our team there. We're going to be watching it closely for you. We'll give you all the updates today on Court TV Live. In New York City, we've got Diddy's sex trafficking case resuming at 9 a.m. Eastern Time with more testimony from a former assistant of his. Now, in Massachusetts, we've also got the prosecution's case continuing in defendant Karen Reed's retrial. Court's going to start up at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, and we'll go there live together when it does. And that is our top story this morning. Entering day 19 with Karen Reed's defense team questioning digital forensic analyst Shanon Burgess. Monday, it's a bombshell moment when Burgess told the jury about two significant events surrounding the timeline. John O'Keefe's cell phone when it was last used, and focus on a three-point turn event and a backing maneuver discovered from analyzing the data contained inside of Karen Reed's SUV. So Burgess collected this data from the black box infotainment system within Reed's black Lexus SUV. And on direct, he described his opinion about that three-point turn event.
These two clocks, one on the left being the Lexus clock that reads 12:23:38 a.m., and the other clock on Mr. O'Keefe's iPhone has a different time, 12:23:59 to 12:24:07. Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty if these two clocks pertain to an event that's happening at the same time or a different time?
Yes. So these two clocks are, we are synchronizing these clocks to an event that is happening at the same time.
Okay, so that's significant. John O'Keefe's data in his phone, syncing up the exact timing, the clock on his phone with the clock in Karen Reed's SUV. On cross, defense attorney Robert Alessi pushed Burgess on his qualifications, his findings. Let's take a look at some of what he said.
Some of the testing you discussed with Mr. Brennan, that testing didn't occur until after this trial started, correct? Some of the testing you described in direct?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, so that testing didn't even occur in the trial. Just assume the trial started at April 22nd. So the testing you described when you were talking about aligning clocks and GPS, that occurred after April 22nd, correct?
Correct, it did.
Okay, and so then there was also this, the backup maneuver that was described as happening at 12:32:04 to 12:32:12 on Karen Reed's SUV. Let's take a listen to what he said.
There was a second text stream event that you were analyzing.
Correct. There is a second text stream event.
And what is that second text stream event?
That second text stream event is a backing up maneuver.
When you apply that variance between the Lexus clock and Mr. O'Keefe's phone,
the time of that event with the clock variance adjusted is 12:32:04 to between 12:32:04 and 12:32:12.
Okay, that's 8 seconds. And why is that significant? Well, Officer John O'Keefe's phone stopped moving for good at 12:32:09. So at 12:32 a.m., there's the backing maneuver on the morning of January 29th, 2022. And at the exact same time, John O'Keefe's phone locks up, stops moving, and then significantly drops in temperature through all the hours overnight when it's later found at 34 Fairview Road. Let's talk about this. Was that a lights out moment for Karen Reed? Let's bring in our legal eagles. Former prosecutors Randolph Rice and Melba Pearson are on the program. Okay, so let's start with the backing maneuver, because that was by far the biggest bombshell that was dropped on Monday by Hank Brennan and his team, that Karen Reed's Lexus contains data that matches up exactly to the time that John O'Keefe's phone stopped, locked, and quit moving. Melba, your thoughts on this?
So good morning, Julie and Randolph. And yes, I think this was a lights out moment. This is one of those bombshell moments that as a prosecutor, you love, you dream about, because this is basically almost irrefutable actual evidence that shows that she was backing up right around the time that the victim was killed. And there's not a whole lot of explanations as to why else she'd be doing that at that time. And it refutes a lot of her statements. Now, of course, the flip side is that unfortunately, the defense was able to cross the witness on some inconsistencies or maybe lies he put in his resume. And that's one of those unforced errors that, that can basically take a lot away from the credibility of his work, his testing, and the testimony he gave. So even though this was a bombshell moment, I don't know if those errors and things that he did that were brought out on cross are going to take away from the impact of that testimony. That's what remains to be seen to me.
Yeah, Melba, you're exactly right about that. You know, I'm like shaking my head when I'm like hearing this testimony on cross about qualifications and LinkedIn and all that, and it's just like, was this not discovered sooner? Did nobody take a look? You know, it's just, man, like, does that change how his testimony is viewed? Randolph, what do you think about all that, please?
Yeah, I think you guys are both right, and good morning. I think that ultimately his credibility comes into question because what he is saying is that while the times don't match up exactly in real time, if we slide the scale, they match up. And that's where the defense can win with this witness, because the state would have had a great argument if it would have been perfect, but it's not. And he has to say, well, I need to shift the time a little bit. And if you shift the time, then it matches up perfectly. And therefore you go to his credibility and can you believe him? And then the jury says, well, do we really take that as fact?
Yeah, great point, Randolph. You know, I just wonder, what are they going to do on redirect? You know, because I get that with LinkedIn, not everybody's updating their profile all the time. It is kind of weird when you enter in the qualifications, and I could see how maybe that's explainable, the way that in which he was like, yeah, look, I tried to enter it in as my degree was in progress. But, you know, in terms of the misinterpretation between gigabits and gigabytes, that had me shaking my head a little bit. Melba, tell me, is the cross going in the right direction? Robert Alessi and what he's, you know, being paid to do here, you know, on behalf of Karen Reed and chipping away at this expert who's, by the way, refuting their expert's report. The whole reason this guy was even brought in by the Commonwealth is because the Commonwealth's contention is that the defense omitted a few pieces of data that should have been analyzed. So that's why this guy was even brought in the first place. I think that's being underreported, but that's just me. Melba, what do you think? Is Alessi getting the job done for this jury?
I think he's going in the right direction because, again, it's all about taking those little discrepancies and building bit by bit to show, hey, we've got reasonable doubt. You can't convict Karen Reed. So I think the prosecution is going to have to come back on redirect and really refocus the jury on his qualifications, you know, how many these analyses the witness has done and that sort of thing to kind of take the sting off of the, you know, potential view that he was not truthful about his background, things like that. But, you know, they've definitely done a good job at putting something in the jurors' minds for them to think about.
Right, Melba. I want to focus in more on the times, again, because, you know, for these prosecutors, they've got to keep the jury's eye on the ball. I'm sure you both agree with that. As flawed a witness as this may or may not be, the times are very telling. So we have a defendant who is claiming that this collision never happened. Her defense, the posture, how anybody even heard about this case was because she was with her team having press conferences claiming that she was framed, claiming that she's been a victim of a conspiracy and a cover-up. The data from the SUV, Randolph, saying that this backup maneuver, which is said to have hit John O'Keefe, it happened at 12:32. That we know her car reconnects with his home Wi-Fi at 12:36. And then the car is powered off at 12:42. So we have about 6 minutes there where she's at the house doing, I don't know what. We don't have the Ring camera video from that time. I'm curious if you think this is problematic for the defendant, if we focus in on the time of the backup, the time of the connection, and then the time that the car goes off. Is it telling?
It can be, but again, this goes to the credibility and the reliability of the data and how they had to shift the time to make it work under the narrative for the Commonwealth. You know, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, and it doesn't count in cases where there's reasonable doubt, and if you have reasonable doubt, you're found not guilty. So I just worry that shifting of the time and that we have to sort of make it fit our narrative is going to hold up in the mind of the jury to where they say, yes, this is an airtight timeline. I believe that this is the way it happened per the Commonwealth.
Randolph Rice, Melba Pearson, thank you both. We'll leave it here for now. And of course, we'll have more analysis coming up when Court TV Live begins. We're going to go right to Massachusetts at 9 a.m. and we'll see what happens with the continuation of the cross. Still ahead here on opening statements, we are focusing on Diddy's trial after the break. The judge sending a warning to the prosecutors about the evidence. And later in the show, is there a leaker in the Idaho 4 student murders case? Well, the judge believes there is. We'll talk about how it could tip the scales ahead of his upcoming trial.
Is Karen Reed a killer girlfriend?
She's guilty.
Or the scapegoat in an elaborate cover-up?
Karen Reed was framed!
Karen Reed is accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend.
Defendant stated repeatedly, I hit him, I hit him.
She may end up taking the stand. Her first trial ended with a hung jury. They haven't proven anything.
Will a jury finally agree on a verdict?
We know who did it.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. Sometimes you gotta do that. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now.
As alleged in the indictment, to carry out this conduct, Sean Combs led and participated in a racketeering conspiracy that used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity.
Now for what's trending in true crime as testimony continues in the sex trafficking trial from music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. More celebrities who are associated with the artist and his label are being called as case witnesses. The former bad boy artist Dawn Richard spent the last 2 days on the stand recounting her experiences during her time with the music groups Diddy Dirty Money and Danity Kane. Another former member of the group Danity Kane, Aubrey O'Day, has been very vocal about alleged mistreatment from Diddy for years. She was seen in New York City last week, which of course sparked some conversations that she may be called as a witness. Here's what she told Amy Robach and TJ Holmes on their podcast.
First of all, are you here to testify in the Diddy trial?
No, I'm not here to testify for the Diddy trial that I know of.
Hey, you know what? Was that ever something that came up or consideration? Did you ever get a call? Any lawyer? Did you even stand by and maybe even think you might be called?
I was contacted by Homeland Security, and I did have a meeting with Homeland Security.
So our question this morning for our power panel, why isn't Aubrey O'Day being called as a witness? Let's bring in our guest. Still with me, attorney Randolph Rice. I want to welcome in a writer and the host of the podcast No Filter with Zach Peter. Zach Peter, good morning to you both. All right, so let's start with Aubrey O'Day. So many of us were anticipating her testimony, and it's been a little bit of a letdown that she's not going to be called, at least as far as she knows. Zach Peter, what's going on with that, please?
I think aside from Cassie, more than Dawn, we were expecting to see Aubrey. Aubrey's been so vocal and arguably, you know, the bigger star here when it comes to a lot of the breakout stars from Danity Kane. So I think a lot of people were shocked. I think even Aubrey seemed kind of shocked in that podcast interview. But I mean, it just goes to show that maybe she doesn't have as powerful testimony as she's alluded to over the years.
Yeah, that's a great point. We know that Homeland Security did interview her, and Randolph, you were a prosecutor. One would think that if she had something that could advance the case and prove the charges at issue, that they would use her, right?
Absolutely, Julie. And it appears from the statement that she's made in the past is that she would be providing what's called hearsay in the courtroom. And, you know, we all know hearsay is not going to come in. So she would be testifying to probably what other people told her. So why not have the government just have those other people come into court and testify instead of what she heard those other people told her? It just makes more sense for the government's case.
Sure. Randolph, thank you. Let's take a listen to a clip from Amy Robach and TJ Holmes' podcast where Aubrey O'Day's on there talking about how she and other artists have some sympathy for Diddy at times, and at other times see him as a monster.
You know, I talk to everybody most of the nights, and it's triggering everybody in different ways. It is a whirlwind. We go up, we go down. Some days we have sympathy for Puff. Some days we feel that he's an absolute monster, and we say all kinds of things that I cannot repeat.
Oh my, yeah, she's been very vocal for years, as we know. Zach Peter, in Hollywood, where you are, What's the temperature among trial watchers with Diddy? Is there some sympathy? Is there a feeling that this is overcharged, or is there any kind of sign of relief, like finally something is being done after there have been complaints of abuse that we know have come up years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's hopeful that there's some justice that's done here, especially now that we're getting vindication for Cassie. And we've heard about the things that have been, done to Cassie for years. We saw the videotape that got leaked. And so I think people want justice, but I also feel like at the same time, there's a lot of trepidation. And even from what I've been keeping up with the trial, I'm also, just seeing how good the defense is doing with cross-examination. I'm even a little worried that maybe, he may get out on this. And I guess we're just going to have to wait to see it play out. But I'm not fully confident that they're going to be able to get him, as much as I do personally see him as a monster and hope that we get justice at the end of the day.
Zach, I love that point. So well said. And Randolph, let me bounce this off of you. I was having a talk with my show producer, Jabari Jackson, just moments before we went on air. And I said, that's the thing about Diddy's case. If I was in private practice, I would take it. I would feel confident if I'm on the defense side, because it's very imperfect and tricky. But yet, I also believe that the government can prove this and that they have the facts and the evidence on their side. Really, I think it's going to come largely down to the lawyering. What do you think, Randolph?
Well, typically when the federal government charges somebody, they usually have a pretty airtight case. And so this is something they've certainly thought out long before the trial started as to how they're going to prove this case. They don't like to go into cases where they feel like this is weak, but it is also a good case for the lawyers to sort of shine and show their best skills and sort of out-lawyer each other and possibly, like you said, get that not guilty for Diddy based on the not being able to prove the state's case.
Right, Randolph. Really anybody's case, as you and Zach know. Let's turn to another aspect of this. This was interesting, really caught our attention when we had our Kelly Craft on Court TV Live in the morning. And one of the things that came out before they started court was the judge kind of gave a warning to prosecutors, saying that he had some concern about the testimony that had been shared. He said, quote, "Testimony that relies on hearsay strikes me as a case built on gossip." And Kelly described it as somewhat of a warning to prosecutors that we can't have a trial built on gossip, and we better have direct testimony coming from your witnesses as to what you're alleging happened. Lawyers representing Diddy responded in part saying, quote, "I think this is becoming sort of a bad act free for all." So that makes us wonder what Diddy gossip could be coming in as evidence. Okay, this is an interesting question. Zach Peter, want to take a crack at it? What do you think, please?
I mean, I think this also talks about or speaks to why Aubrey O'Day wasn't put on the stand. I think, rather than putting more high-profile celebs on the stand to speak about Diddy, I think they want to focus more on proving the alleged crimes rather than, a lot of the speculation or a lot of the hearsay that I think a witness like Aubrey O'Day would be able to bring to the table, especially considering she hasn't been in Diddy's life for a very long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're exactly right. I think you're hitting the nail on the head in so much as we know there may be people who have an axe to grind with Diddy and have bad behaviors they would love to point out, but if it's not germane to the case at hand and not relevant in advancing the proof that the government must put forth, they've got the burden, then it really shouldn't be coming in. Randolph, tell me, if you're those prosecutors, ouch, getting that from the judge, ouch, what would you be thinking hearing the court say that to you?
Well, I think we need to give Zach a temporary law degree, because he really hit the nail on the head with his analysis of, that's why they didn't bring Miss O'Day in there. But this goes to really the defense attorneys and the prosecutors, I guess, reluctance to object. That's why the rules of evidence are there. You need to object if you think this is hearsay. And so maybe the judge was signaling to them like, hey, guys, get engaged. Object when there's hearsay. This is not going to be a gossip trial. This is going to be a trial based on facts.
Oh, I love that analysis, Randolph. Yes, because judges sometimes do send signals. Perhaps there's an objection here, counselor. Like, wake up, stand up, object to this. I'm going to rule in your favor and sustain it. So, yeah, perhaps that's what His Honor is doing. We will have more live reporting throughout the day as our team is there inside and outside of the courthouse with this big case that the world is watching. A big thanks to our friend Zach Peter for coming back on the show. Zach, would love to have you back again sometime soon. Take care. And coming up next here on Opening Statements, here's what we've got.
Approximately how many bottles of baby oil would be used in a typical freak-off?
A lot. I would say definitely somewhere close to 10.
Oh, we're not done talking about Diddy as the baby oil and the wild sexcapades have dominated the headlines. We're cutting through a lot of the noise and the sensational talk. And we're talking about whether the prosecutors are proving the sex trafficking. And we're doing that with an expert who used to work for Homeland Security. That's next. Plus, the judge overseeing Brian Kohberger's case thinks that somebody is leaking information to the media. So how do they find the leaker? Our private investigator weighs in. Welcome back. This morning in our spotlight, the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking case and the expected testimony of some more sex workers. Diddy's ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, testified about their freak-offs in different United States cities and that she couldn't leave because he controlled her career, her finances, essentially her life. And she said that he would pay the sex workers to take part in the freak-offs. Here's some of that testimony from court transcripts using AI voice technology.
Who primarily reached out to the escorts?
I did.
Why did you primarily reach out to the escorts?
Just based on who Sean is, I didn't want to put him in that position. And that was just my job, really.
When you say that was your job, what do you mean by that?
It was expected of me.
Who expected it of you?
Sean.
Who, if anyone, told you to reach out to these escorts?
Sean did.
And for all the individuals whose photos I've just shown you, in addition to the photos we saw yesterday, what event did you see all those individuals for?
For freak-offs.
Was Sean involved in all of the freak-offs with those individuals?
Yes.
Did you have sex or perform sex acts with all of the individuals that we saw during those freak-offs?
Yes.
Ms. Ventura, were at least some of those individuals paid?
Yes.
For the individuals who were paid, whose money was used to pay them?
Sean's money.
All right, so let's talk about how the behavior that occurred here can be legally considered federal sex trafficking. Let's talk about how prosecutors prove it, what elements they have to prove to the jury. Each crime has what we call elements in the law, certain aspects of it that have to be established in order for someone to find someone guilty of it. So we're honing in on what is count 2 of the indictment here. That pertains to Cassie. That is one of the sex trafficking charges on the indictment. There's another one pertaining to another woman. Once we hear that testimony, we'll assess that. To help me do this, let's bring in former prosecutor and the director of prosecution projects now at Florida International University, Melba Pearson, and former special agent with the Department of Homeland Security. He's also a PhD and a firearms expert, Dr. Jason Piccolo. All right, so Dr. Jason, you have worked these cases. You have investigated sex trafficking cases. You've charged them. So with respect to this charge that pertains to Cassie, first question, do you think it's proper?
I do. You know, this is a classic, I shouldn't say classic case, but this is a solid case of trafficking. And if anything comes out of this trial, maybe it'll bring more awareness of that this is going on everywhere. But yes, they've definitely are checking the blocks when it comes to the trafficking case on this.
Dr. Jason, let me ask you something pertaining to what I think can be, you know, somewhat of a myth with sex trafficking that I think that sometimes people accidentally confuse it with human smuggling and taking a person across a border or, you know, somehow discreetly moving a person through a building or something to get them to a place where the trafficking can occur. Here, we're talking about just, you know, presumably going on Diddy's private jet to New York or to Vegas or Miami, LA, all the cities they talked about. That kind of movement across state lines. That's enough, isn't it?
You know, that is part of it. Here's the thing with trafficking. Let's talk about smuggling and trafficking. Smuggling, you're paying someone to get you from point A to point B, and then you're free. You're free to go on in your life. Now, trafficking is this. Someone is taking you from point A to point B, and you don't have freedom of movement. And it doesn't have to be what people think. It doesn't have to be like, hey, we're gonna grab you, we're gonna throw you in a container, we're gonna move you here and there, we're gonna kidnap you. No. If you feel like your life is in jeopardy or that you don't have freedom of movement and you can't leave, then you can be trafficked. So with this is like, look at Cassie. She has been trafficked. She has been groomed. P. Diddy allegedly groomed her and had her brought into this world, and now he's moving her from point A to point B. She doesn't have freedom of movement, or even appears that she can't get out of it. I mean, if you look at the videos that, he's dragging her back from here and there and beating her, she doesn't have freedom of movement. So it's coercion, it's the whole gambit of trafficking. So I think they have a really solid case with this.
Dr. Jason, thank you for that. Yeah, you touched on, coercion, and that's part of the charge. Melba, as you know, they've alleged sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. Element 1, providing a person, as simple as providing someone. Element 2, to engage in a commercial sex act, where anything of value is exchanged. Element 3, by some type of force, fraudulent, or coercive behavior. Have these prosecutors checked every box, Melba?
I think they have, and I know there was a lot of criticism around, oh my gosh, this is not a domestic violence case, why are we focus so much on that? But that by nature is the coercion, right? Because she knows that her safety's at risk if she doesn't comply. She's testified a million different ways from Sunrise how anything could set him off if she didn't wear her hair in a certain way, if she had a look on her face or whatever, he would fly into a rage and beat her. She felt that she did not have an option in terms of participating with freak-offs if she didn't feel like doing it because she was ill, because it was her time of the month, whatever the case may be. She felt she couldn't say no. That's coercion. And it doesn't have to be a very tit for tat, if you don't do this, I'm going to beat you. It can be implied because if breathing the wrong way results in a beating, absolutely that saying no to a freak-off was going to cause you physical harm. Also, there were the security guards who carried firearms, so there was this environment of violence and fear that was always prevalent, again, that fed into her mindset, thinking that she didn't have a choice and that she couldn't escape.
Melba, really helpful analysis there. Thank you. I have another clip for you and Dr. Jason. This is, again, using the AI technology with the actual court transcripts. Cassie on the stand talking about how she thought Diddy wanted to hurt her.
Ms. Ventura, yesterday you mentioned blackmail materials. What were you referring to when you said blackmail materials?
Blackmail materials would be actual sex videos, freak-off videos, even just other embarrassing videos. Me drunk, anything that would make me look not great.
When, if ever, would Sean mention the freak-off videos to you?
He would mention them when he was upset about something. It was just a pretty common thing. One time I dated someone else. That is what it was all about. I'm going to put out 2 embarrassing videos of you. He just wanted to hurt me.
Dr. Jason, assess the case for us. With Cassie's testimony, that clip in particular, what does that tell you as an investigator?
Like I said before, this is trafficking. This is human trafficking. A lot of people don't realize what trafficking is. Like I said before, they think it's kidnapping and grabbing people out of vans and stuff like this. But this is grooming. This is him saying, hey, you know what? He brings her into this world. He gets compromising videos and says, hey, you know what? If you do this, I'm going to release this video and your life will be ruined. She is essentially kidnapped in place. She cannot move. She's being trafficked. It's industrialized rape is another word I like to put out there too with this, is because he's using her for some sort of commercial gain. And that isn't what people think of, like, he's not getting a monetary value out of it. He's getting a gain of it. So this is just, I cannot imagine being in her place, but this is happening everywhere in every city and every town. And it really needs the awareness. And unfortunately, you have cases like this to where it can bring awareness to the public.
Yeah, a brilliant analysis and explanation for us, Dr. Jason. When we think about Cassie, we're thinking, gosh, here's a woman who seemed to have it all. Right, seem to have it all. And critics of this case are folks who are adamantly supportive of Diddy and encouraging of the defense and the aggressive cross, look at it like, well, she had freedom to leave. But did she really have the freedom, Dr. Jason?
No, absolutely not. If she left, he has the videos. He has a compromising situation she's in. She's just paralyzed. She has no out. And this is me thinking about it like as a human being that like, hey, you know what? She cannot move. She cannot leave this situation because she's so ingrained in him, and she does have a trauma bond with him as well. So, I mean, there is so much going on with Cassie that it's beyond just trafficking, and it's beyond what people commonly think like, hey, you know what? She has freedom of movement. No, she doesn't. She's mentally and physically with the bodyguards and everything stuck with P. Diddy.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Melba, do you think these prosecutors can call a DV expert to explain some of the behavior that might seem hard to reconcile?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they can, and I think they should, because again, there's so many misconceptions about how domestic violence presents itself, and the whole, well, if I was in that situation, I would have left. I would have. And that's not necessarily the case. And you have to kind of break down the psychology of what's going on. And then one more point to note, let's not forget, she tried to leave. Okay, the video right there that we're looking at, she tried to leave the freak off and he pulled her back. So for all of those who are saying, well, she could have left, yeah, she tried. It didn't go well. So those are the types of aspects that I think a domestic violence expert can really hone in on, that even one of these instances really brings that person to know, like, okay, I'm not going to try again because I know what happened to me the last time. Let me just comply because that's the only way I can stay safe.
Oh, Melba, so well said. You're giving me chills. As you were saying that, I'm envisioning the closing argument where that prosecutor can point to that video and say she tried to leave. There's your proof. There it is. Wow, I could talk to you both all day. We'll save it for another segment. I have to let you both get off to your days. Melba, we'll see you later. Thank you so much for being a weekly guest on the show. And Dr. Jason, you're going to be returning for Court TV Live in just a little while, so we'll do some analysis of the Karen Reed case together. Still ahead here on Opening Statements, the judge overseeing Brian Kohberger's case believes there's a leaker. Could it tip the scales?
It was the biggest story in the world.
People saw the facts differently.
Somebody manufactured evidence in this case.
This was kind of a crazy spectacle.
This case is a circus. He was an icon.
They are in for the fight of their lives.
Everybody thinks you're guilty.
Trial and error. Why did O.J. win? Marathon begins Saturday morning, 9/8 Central. Only on Court TV.
Now, for what's tipping the scales of justice, the judge in the Brian Kohberger trial wants to know who is leaking information about the case. So just days ago, some new details emerged about Kohberger's internet searches, reportedly in the time frame before and after allegedly killing those 4 University of Idaho students. The searches, according to documents obtained by NBC's Dateline, include Ted Bundy, searches for pornography with the words forced, passed out, drugged, and sleeping. And it turns out this may have violated a gag order. Well, now, 4th District Judge Stephen Hippler has ordered prosecutors and defense attorneys to provide him a list of everybody who might have had access to that information. So, how will authorities find the leaker? Let's bring in our guests. I want to welcome in private investigator and military and NYPD veteran Manuel Gomez and trial attorney Randolph Rice. Manuel, our team, we were kidding but not kidding in our editorial team. We were saying, just call Manuel Gomez. He will figure it out. He will find the leaker in no time. So I want to get your insight. What is the court to do?
Well, you know, Julie, all this information leaves an electronic digital footprint of where it was sent to. But one of the things I want to commend the judge is assigning a special prosecutor to do this will allow him to be able to see who had the chain of custody. And not only that, but to see all the what they call the supplemental information forms. These are the forms that detectives fill out when they have the evidence. So in this case, I'm 100% sure, and I think so is the judge, that the prosecution side released this evidence, because if you look at the pictures, it shows his eyebrows bushy. Everything they released was to benefit the prosecution. So I know that the electronic digital footprints, the supplemental information forms filled out by the detectives will give them the reason to be able to find who is the leaker in this case.
That's
but on
really
the flip side of that, Julie, like in New York, Pedro Hernandez case, the defense side released that information and got the guy dismissed. So, you know, this can be good and this can be bad. In this case, it was bad.
Right, right. Great analysis, Manuel. Randolph, tell me, if they are able to pinpoint the leaker, and let's say it goes back to one of the lawyers, I'm not saying that the lawyers are at fault, but if it is proven that one of them had a hand in this, what kind of sanctions might the judge impose?
That's a great question, Julie, because if it is the lawyers, they certainly could face some sort of violation of the court order, which could lead to either a monetary sanction, meaning they have to pay money, they may be restricted from introducing certain evidence, or there could be a contempt of court, and if you're in contempt of court, the judge can put you in jail. So, you know, there's a lot of things that could happen if it's one of the lawyers. I'm interested to see where this goes and sort of how they figure out how it got leaked. Certainly the media is not, the journalists aren't going to turn it over, so they're going to have to go at it from a different angle.
Oh, that's another good point. Yeah, Randolph, thank you for that. In the sanctions, as you said, wide-ranging. The judge has a lot of discretion. Manuel, if you were working this case, let's say you were the investigator brought in by the special prosecutor to help with this, where would you start?
I would start immediately with the detectives. I would start with who had the initial chain of custody. And remember, all the detectives in this case have to fill out a form, which in the NYPD and the New York East Coast side, we call it supplemental information form. And Ohio has a similar one as well. Okay, and that's going to show you who had that evidence. Again, Julie, if you look at the evidence that was released, it proves unequivocally that that evidence release benefits the prosecution. This is why the judge really was on top of the prosecution when he was talking about these points. But I would start with the detectives, and then I would go down the line on what phones, what their numbers were, and then have them, the digital footprints, retrieved so that we can show who released that information. And I think this would be a quick job if they do that.
Oh, I love that. You know, another great thing you just pointed out for us, Manuel. Yeah, it's not going to benefit the defense, right? Having that out there, the way they've been fighting. You're right. So, you know, Manuel, do you kind of start with a more suspicious eye on the state side of things?
Yes, and like I said, I don't believe that the prosecutors in this case, they know that this is a no-nonsense judge, Judge Hippler. So I don't think that the prosecutors released this. This is something that cops would do and detectives would do. And I've seen this countless times in other states, especially in New York. So again, I think that this special prosecutor is going to have a lot of fun once he starts pulling the digital footprints of these detectives.
Well, you're giving me so many great question ideas, Manuel. Randolph, let me ask you, I'm sure you've been there when you have an officer working a case with you and they do something to file things up in some way. Maybe it's, something like this, a leak or something, or misplacing evidence, or, who knows, not documenting something properly. That's tough, isn't it, when you're a prosecutor and you have to deal with that?
Yeah, and really the best prosecutors are the ones who can take that and pivot and move to the point of saying, okay, now we're in a different position than we were, say, 5 minutes ago or 5 days ago. Let's now figure out how we prove our case with this new wrinkle. What evidence can't we use? What evidence can we use? Has there been a perception or change in the attitude of maybe the jury or the jury pool based on the new evidence that got out or got leaked? So you really have to be able to pivot.
Yeah, I could talk to you both all day. Such great analysis and insight from you both. Randolph Rice, Manuel Gomez, thank you both so much. We'll look forward to seeing you back here very soon. And that is all for this episode of Opening Statements. My friends, you can watch it again, share it, tell your friends about it. Every weekday morning, we get you all ready for Court TV Live.